Hey, quick. Haamitake pitaya hipi. Ushimalo na ha. Ekchewi chashamelo. Ambe tukile mi chante taoaglake na hana pe chuzapelo. Hohe chajemi ta wamnisha ge doba ima chapi. Oma kia na ha agnagopta. All my relatives again would like to welcome you. We offer you all my hand in a good hearty handshake. And my Assiniboine name is Eagle Claw, but they also call me Ford. They refer to me as Ford. And in that, it's I think it's highly important for us to realize the family structure. That was one of the ways that they took our strength from us as it relates to the family unit and what all these particular positions in the family represented and whatnot. And they stole our children to kind of disseminate that whole strength that we maintained and we represented. They couldn't understand how we could hang together in such hard times, through tough winters, through droughts and whatnot. But we always hung tough because everybody in that family unit had a responsibility, and they were taught that throughout their times. And a lot of times the mother and father would turn their child over to the women from 0 to about 3 or 4 or 5 years old. And then after they got 5 years old, let's say, then they would turn them over to the Oonspekia, the aunts and the uncles that would become their teachers. And so it was taught to us that when an uncle told you something to do, you'd never question it. You'd do it because he was teaching you. And then when an auntie told you what to do, you never questioned it, but you would always do it because they were teaching you. And this teaching process, a lot of people don't understand, is we get so caught up in this, what do they call it, this linear form of teaching, reading, writing, and arithmetic. And people don't understand where this educational process comes from. And it really is, they really established it after the Industrial Revolution. And what happened is they got these blocks of time, they got these bells that go off and buzzers and whatnot so that you can move to the next room or go to lunch, and you live by bells and buzzers because what that represented is they were creating good factory workers, and that those blocks of time in which you learned that represented what you would be doing in a factory. That's why it made reference to the Industrial Revolution. And so we've maintained that concept throughout, even to today. But in our cultural value system, it was more of an abstract learning process. And what that means is experiential teaching, hands-on. We'd actually do what it is that they asked us to do for the sake of learning our responsibility, not only again to ourselves, but mostly to our family and our tribe, and some of the things that we needed to have input on, even as young children, as it relates to some of the movings. We were very nomadic. I'm talking about Northern Plains Indians. We followed the buffalo, so there was a lot of things for us to help out in when the moving was taken. We could move camp in, a matter of 20 minutes or so, in spite of all the teepees, because each family member had a responsibility, and based on that, they would be disciplined enough to do those things. And like the family structure was really something that was important, because again, if you didn't do what you were taught to do, you would bring shame and you'd bring guilt to the family that you represented. That's how important it was for the sake of controlling all these different parts of this particular tribe. And each one had a place they camped, and somewhere near the door, somewhere away from the door, somewhere in the middle, whatever the case may be. But based on that family, they would always look at, maybe one family would make pemmican, the other family would be skinning deer, the other family would be cutting up meat and storing it, one would be picking teepsila or whatever, wild onions, or every family had a responsibility, and that's what gave us that strength. And again, remember, this is based on natural law for the sake of survival. not of just yourself, but for the sake of the greater good. Again, you hear that term, and that's that tribal or communal living attitude that we had. And in that, you always took care of one another in a good way. And we have what we call Tiwahe, which is our family, our mother, our father, our sister, our brothers, and all that good stuff. But we also have Tioshpae, which was extended families. Extended families, again, were not necessarily blood families, but because of hunka or whatever, you took somebody as a brother or a sister or a mom or a dad in an adoption ceremony, then those responsibilities were extended to them as well. If you were a man, you'd go hunt and provide, and you protect them as well. And so it all represented and it really had a lot of meaning and purpose as it relates to who and what you were at that time. The old people would sit and they'd watch. And if you're ever around Indians, a family of Indians, you watch them and they'll tease. And there's a purpose in that. When we tease one another, the old people sit and they watch. If he gets mad, that means he needs a little bit more character development to overcome himself, because if he gets mad, he doesn't have that character to overcome and tease back. Instead, he took it personal, and then his feelings get hurt. He's a little bit sensitive, so they would watch you like that, and then whatever they were teasing you about, then they'd help you strengthen that particular virtue that you needed strengthened to make yourself stronger. Because in our language we say, "Mitakuya prehichiapo," my relatives, make yourself strong. And they don't mean in muscle, but they mean in character. And how you strengthen yourself in character is you exercise these virtues that we needed to do each and every day just to develop that strength of character. And I'm talking about compassion, empathy, loving, caring, sharing, generosity, patience. These are virtues that we work on as Indian people to help us make us stronger, so that when somebody's coming and depending on you, you'll be able to be a little bit more effective in that manner. So the family helped us to understand the importance of that. That's why the mother and father were not the teachers, because they would protect their kids, as much as they could. But the uncles and aunts would tell them what to do. And in that, they were the disciplinarians. They were the ones making sure this individual was becoming stronger in their character. And in a more contemporary way of understanding the importance of that, I sit on a board in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, Canada, where it's an advisory board to the school system, the Saskatoon Public School System, where we deal with 20,000 children within that district there. And they were having problems with getting the families to come to the schools because of a lot of the bad things that happened to their mothers and fathers in the public school system. Well, an individual by the name of Dr. Kenneth Goodwill, he had this understanding that maybe we could incorporate a cultural value system to help them realize how this family really works and how effective it is as it relates to the strength and the growth of our children. And I've always said this, the diversity and the uniqueness of our cultural value system should always become an enhancement and enrichment for the sake of the growth of our children. Well, Dr. Goodwill found it important that we try to incorporate that into our school system. So we did. He established a board, which I sat on, and he had this philosophy, somewhat of a ideological paradigm shift in which that whole structure of the school itself, as it relates to the block times and all that good stuff, that changed. And so what we just said was we taught the Board of Regents, then the administrators, and then the teachers, and then they took all that information and shared it with the children. Well, one of the things that he shared with the teachers is that instead of looking at yourself as somebody that's autocratic and got to take control, look at yourself, if you're a man, as the uncle to these children. Look at yourself if you're a woman as the auntie to all of these children you're wishing to educate. And he said, see what happens then. And so that's what they did. And then the children got comfortable in those classes, especially the Indian children. They could relate naturally with that. And so what happened when their kids got comfortable in those particular scenarios, that attracted the parents to come to the school. And so naturally the parents came, and then when the parents came, they were treated with such respect that kind of put away all of the bad things that happened during their school time. So it was functional, it worked. So that all resulted from that strength that we represented as First Nations people, that the strength of the family unit. And each one of those positions, the mom, the dad, the uncle, the aunt, the grandpa, and the grandma, all had input into the growth of that one particular child. And in that would the firstborn boy, the Chaskay, the firstborn girl, the Winona, the grandparents, after they got to a certain age, would take that particular child and would go live with them. And people didn't often understand why that occurred. Why did they take that child? Well, the grandparents wanted to share their way of life with this particular child, the firstborn, and so that they would carry that on with them naturally, you know. So in that, in even today, in every family, there's usually one person that takes on this way of life, this way of thinking, this way of believing, and it's just done in such a natural way that people aren't understanding that. So I don't care how white you may be, if you got a little bit of Indian in you, that may attract you towards this way of believing, this way of understanding this natural law and conveying that on. And a lot of the times when you get like that, you feel chosen or you feel special. You're not. You're just common people, but by the sake of this Wanchantanka, this spiritual energy, they guided you to kind of understand your roots, your culture, your language, all that good stuff to a certain degree. And so in that natural process, as it relates to that structure of family, that was our strength. And once the non-Indian people came, they recognized that as our strength. Guess what they did? They took our children, forced them to assimilate to a way of life that was totally alien to us based on the standards that they were implementing on us. And it really just took that whole family unit and dissipated it to where it is now. And then when the parents, when they took the kids at such a young age, the parents had no parenting skills because they, again, remember abstract learning? Again, experiential teaching, they didn't have that opportunity. So when the children were brought back when they're 16, 17 years old, the parents didn't know what to do. And so it all had a great effect, negative effect on us as a peoples, as a tribe, as a family. And so in that, you can just about understand how these things came about based on a learned behavior. And so now they look at us like we're noble savages. We're people that are just drunk all the time, lazy, no account, no responsibility. Well, that's a learned behavior because of what they did to us as it relates to dissipating that family structure. That's how important that family is. And again, I haven't drank for 40 years, haven't done drugs for 40 years, because when my natural father passed away, because of the love he had for his family, I chose to quit all that stuff. And so as a result of that, that's an act of love. Every day that I'm sober, that's how much I love my father, my natural father. And so in that change that came about for me, if it wasn't for my father passing away at that time and how much I love my dad, I probably would have became that noble savage, that definition of who and what we are as Indian people in a contemporary way of life. But in that, it's a beautiful way of life. helps us to understand our responsibility not only to ourselves but to our family, that structure that it represents, and to become very respectful, to maintain that dignity and that honor so we can sustain that integrity that this value system represents. Ho, metake oasi.